Hello, I'm Pat Shelton. Catholic Magazine presents the conclusion of our two-part discussion marking the 10th anniversary of the U.S. Catholic Bishop's pastoral letter, The Challenge of Peace, God's Promise, Our Response. Tonight, we look at the challenge to us as peacemakers in the pursuit of justice.
Hello again, everyone. I'm Paul Perello. The 10th anniversary of the letter will be officially observed on May 9th. And in anticipation of that event, for the past 2 weeks of our program, we've invited a panel of guests to share their thoughts, feelings, and observations regarding this historic document. On my left again, it's my pleasure to reintroduce Mr. Tom O'Rourke. Tom is a member of Pax Christi and the Catholic Peace Fellowship, a former member of the Archdiocesan Committee for World Peace and Justice. Tom has been committed to peace issues for more than 25 years. To Tom's left is Sister Marie Lucy. Sister Marie is also a member of Pax Christi and the Catholic Peace Fellowship. For 15 years, Sister has been actively involved in peace and justice issues for her religious community, the Sisters of St. Francis of Philadelphia, including the establishment of their Peace and Justice Office. Also, we have on our program Mr. Dick Taylor. Like Tom, Dick is also a former member of the Archdiocesan Commission for World Peace and Justice. He has extensive knowledge and experience in work for peace, social justice, and human rights. In addition to having written numerous magazine and newspaper articles, Dick is the author of 5 books, including A Peace Ministry in Practice and Nuclear Holocaust and Christian Hope. And finally, joining our panel, Mrs. Sheila Bello, a committed mother of 3, who turned a casual interest in the environment during her college years into an active pursuit of a graduate degree in environmental education. Sheila is also a member of the governing board of the Center for the Celebration of Creation at the Chestnut Hill United Methodist Church, an ecumenical group working to awaken in people a sense of the imperative for a healthful relationship between humans and the earth. And we also like to mention that Sheila is a member of the Epiphany Parish in Norristown. Again, welcome to all of you. It's our second week discussing this letter that, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we will officially celebrate the 10th anniversary of the pastoral letter on May 9th of this year. And tonight we like to focus, I guess, on the elements of peace and justice as it pertains to the bishop's letter of 10 years ago. And I think before we can get into the relationship between peace and justice, we need to really understand the definition, if you will, of these two words. Dick, first of all, when we hear the word peace, what is actually meant? What is the definition of peace, if you will?
Well, I think maybe at bottom we can describe peace as the absence of violence and of hatred, and the presence of love, and particularly a profound respect for the sacred dignity of the human person. We will not have peace as long as there is not respect for people as made in the image of God.
Sister, then the definition of justice.
Well, there could be complicated definitions, but for me, the simplest way to say it is being in right relationship with ourselves, in my own heart, relationship with God, relationship with each other, with the whole human family, and relationship with the earth. Because when we're not in right relationship, that gives rise to fear, suspicion, insecurity, all those things that give rise to violence.
Do we as a Catholic community then understand the relationship between peace and justice? Or has the church been a little bit lax in getting this relationship out to us, and we as Catholics fully understand the relationship, Tom? Do you think we understand this?
Well, I think it's been said enough. I think we have a lot to do to put that into practice, and my own view is that we should be working harder because the peace and justice are so central to the gospel, central to the life and example of Jesus. Mm-hmm. So, yes, I think we're saying the right things and have said them historically, but there's a long way to go to put it into the individual lives.
I think we have to learn how to internalize some of these values and things, and really come to peace within ourselves before we can then extend that peace to other people. And being at peace, feeling one with God, feeling one with the universe, feeling one with our environment will help us to find an inner peace that we can then use in our community and use throughout the world.
I wanted to just make a comment on justice, because I think as Catholics we sometimes tend to interpret justice as charity more than justice. And there's a wonderful story that Joan Chittister, Benedictine sister, told to kind of bring that forward. She said a boulder fell in the middle of a highway, and people would come around the corner and smash their cars into the boulder. And a family sit by the highway would go and help these people. They would pull them out of the wrecks, they would heal their wounds and so on. And after a while, a child who was growing up in this family, because it went on for years, said, "Don't you think maybe we ought to try to move the boulder out of the highway?" You know, charity says we must feed the hungry. Justice asks, why are they hungry? You know, and I think that's a really important distinction, that we have to keep pushing ourselves. Not that there's anything wrong with charity, with compassion. That's certainly basic to our Christian life. But we have to also look at justice, which is a little bit different from charity.
In the pastoral letter of May 3rd of 1983, it dealt primarily, and we dealt with this for the most part in our first program, but it dealt primarily with war and deterrence and nonviolence. But it also dealt with, I guess, peace and justice. 10 years have lapsed since we first got our hands on the letter, the challenge of peace. What do you feel is probably the most pressing justice issue today? A lot of time, 10 years, the things that we thought were important 10 years ago are still important, but they may not be as important as they were 10 years ago. Sister, what, or Tom?
Well,
either one, go ahead.
okay. Well, I would take a more, just looking at things globally, if we project ourselves just 50 or 60 years into the future, the population, the human population of the planet will double. That's a staggering fact that has never happened before in all of history. So there'll be 10 billion people on the planet at that time. I'm conscious of the fact that we, as a very small percentage of the Earth's population, about 4% now, consume such, some people say 30% of all the world's resources. And then I hear when it's time to go to war, we are going out to war because our national interests are at stake. I'm concerned that our national interests mean we want to hold on to all of those resources that we presently consume. That will not be doable in the future.
Sister?
Yeah, related to that, I think that all these issues are connected, and that's why I feel that it's very difficult to name one, because there's such interrelationship. But following upon what Tom said, I think sustainable development is critical now in our time, because there is a widening gap between rich and poor in our own country and also among nations. And therefore, I think we have to work very hard at building a kind of a development in our own country and in other countries that are designed by the people, managed and controlled by the people, and that are friendly to the earth. I think this is critical.
We saw in the last political campaign, I guess, the whole issue of the environment being played up and talked about. Some would say we have now an environmental administration, if you will, Sheila, in Washington. We really need to, as Catholics, as people, as a community, as a nation, really pay attention. And some people would say that this is a pressing issue today. That yes, we need to worry about nuclear proliferation, and we need to worry about the Defense Department and all these other weapons that they're talking about coming down the pike. But we need to turn our attention, some would say, to the environment, and I know you would agree with that.
Yeah, no, this is a tremendously important issue, and raising the awareness, I think, as Sister mentioned, this is, of all issues, but certainly in this area, is really critical. It's something that the community outside of the church has done very strongly over many years, and certainly on the I'll say the international level and the denominational level in churches and organizations, they have also talked about the environment. There have been some parishes involved, but it really hasn't filtered down, I think, as much as I'd like to see it, certainly, to the individuals in the parishes to help them become more aware of issues, the issues of eco-justice, of the poor, certainly the urban poor and other people who can't fight where a toxic dump is going to go or where the incinerator is going to be built, or you're not going to find that in some of the more affluent suburban areas. It's going to be put somewhere where people can't fight the issue, where they don't have the political clout. So there are certain eco-justice issues, I think, that also have to be addressed, that people have to be made aware of.
Dick, what about the issue of violence in our own communities? I mean, we talk about an arms race on a global level, but I mean, in the communities today, I mean, you don't have to go no more than 2 blocks out of your own neighborhood, or in some cases to the corner, to see, you know, or read the papers of children walking to school and having drive-by shootings. I mean, we talk about arms race, and it's out there, it's a global thing, but what are we doing to address the situation locally when we talk about arms races?
I mentioned this a little bit in our last program, and I was thinking about talking to a young African-American leader of a gang, and he talked about his first knowledge of a peace group being a group that went through his community carrying medical supplies to Central America. Now, he didn't object to them being concerned about the poor of Central America, but he said, what about the people right here in our own community? And the amount of violence and the amount of guns, of weapons that are available so easily across the counter now in the United States, I think the Brady Bill is a really important first step for people to work on, that we need to de-escalate the amount of violence in our urban communities. And here in Philadelphia, there are some wonderful organizations like the Anti-Drug, Anti-Violence Coalition, and other groups that are working very hard in our communities to try to reduce the level of violence and to get the guns out of the community. And I think that's something that merits all of our support.
In order to see peace and justice fully implemented in our society, Sister, I guess you would like to see a lot of the money that is spent on the defense budget filtered into local cities, local community groups, in order to get, I guess, the true wheels of peace and justice in motion, whether it's in Philadelphia, Camden, Wilmington, or Trenton, or wherever. You would really like to see part of that. But why can't we get that money? Why can't we get the resources that we need to fully implement peace and justice as defined at the outset of this program?
Right. And of course, I think ultimately peace and justice has to do with a lot more than money. But certainly, I agree with you. You're right. I would like to see that a peace dividend really happen. We have seen a diminishment in our budget of monies allotted to arms and so forth, but not nearly enough, not nearly dramatically enough. I think we need to see economic conversion because the situation now, as we know, is that many of the large defense contractors are laying off people, you know, as the contracts begin then to diminish. And I think it's very important that we become creative in ways to maintain jobs, and we can also transfer or develop new capabilities for the technology, perhaps, that before was employed in making weapons. But I still think there's not the will to do that. I think we're very single-minded, and it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of effort to engage in economic conversion.
Some would say that the reason why we don't see the whole peace and justice initiative moving forward is because there's a lack of role models, if you will, or leaders that really are pushing this forward. Obviously, the four of you come from similar walks of life. You promote the cause within your own parishes, within your own communities, within your own cities, but we don't see anybody emerging, or do we? Do we see somebody emerging on a regional level or a national level who is willing to take this bull by the horns, if you will, and fight for what we need out there today? Is there anybody out there? Is that a problem?
For me, and the pastoral calls all of us to a responsibility. Tom referred to that in the first segment. So, like my first response would be not looking for heroes who are out in front, but that each of us takes seriously this responsibility. And I think we have seen as witness that people, the so-called leaders, have emerged from any walk of life. We have an Archbishop Romero in El Salvador, a bishop who was martyred, for his beliefs. We have a Guatemalan peasant woman, Rigoberta Menchú, who received the Nobel Peace Prize this year. Now, there are people outside our own country, but what I'm saying is that each of us needs to respond and assume leadership.
But do we respond by willing to be a martyr like the Archbishop in South America? I mean, how do we respond? I mean, I don't think too many people are willing to put their life on the line, with all due respect.
Well, but it's really interesting, and I was just thinking as Marie was talking about how we all have a responsibility. An organization that I've been involved in called Witness for Peace, and it was concerned about the situation in Central America and our government's unfortunate support for the Contra War in Nicaragua and for the military in El Salvador. And we put the call out to just ordinary people. Wouldn't you like to come down there and see with your own eyes what's happening? And we got 4,000 people over a period of about 6 years who went down to El Salvador, Guatemala, and Nicaragua, and went right into these war zones. I mean, when they drove in these big trucks back and forth, there was a danger of landmines going off. One whole delegation was kidnapped by the Contras at one point and held for a couple of days. A couple of people were held hostage. And these were just ordinary folks, and it gave me such encouragement. And actually about 40% of the people who went were Catholics. And these were ordinary middle-class people by and large, not activists who went down there. And it just gave me great hope for the courage of ordinary people and their willingness to put their lives on the line for peace.
Yes, and I wanted to pick up on that theme too, because it's just people in our communities that will make the difference. We each have to work on our own personal conversion of heart. But there's a group called Jobs with Peace, which has been active here in Philadelphia for a number of years, and they have for 10 years put out a proposal for converting the Navy Yard to civilian uses. And each time the Navy Yard was threatened, they put more money into the military side of it. So this group has persisted throughout the years, and it looks like now they're going to be called on to say, give us your input. We'd like to make the conversion to the Navy Yard. It's necessary.
In the environmental end of this is the Center for the Celebration of Creation came about because there were a number of religious leaders and environmental leaders in this area, just in the Delaware Valley, who didn't have a forum, who didn't really have a spokesperson, and we kind of merged. We sort of came together. It was started because we wanted a voice. And we're finding other groups now throughout the country who are also these little grassroots groups that have grown up, that feel a spiritual tie to the environment and feel that this is another way to reach people and help them to understand our ties to the environment and what we can do.
What are, I guess, some of the new challenges to peace? If we were sitting here 10 years ago, probably the answer would have been, well, the challenge to peace is the Soviet Union. We've seen, as I mentioned in the first program, I mentioned at the outset of this program, I believe, the Russian bear has gone into its cave to sleep. What are the new challenges to peace today? Is it a proliferation of our environment? Is it violence? Is it the drive-by shootings on the street corner? Is it problems in Central America? What is or are the new challenges to peace today?
I think any place where there's violence and hatred is a challenge to peace, obviously. But I'd like to take just one specific one, which is the Bosnia-Herzegovina situation that's so much in the papers right now, and it is so horrendous, with the destruction of whole cities, the mass rapes of women and girls. I mean, all the things that we've read about. And people are feeling very frustrated because every effort at diplomacy has failed. It leads to agreements that last one day and then are violated. Military solutions, quotes, don't seem really to work there because the Yugoslavs held off the Nazis during World War II, and it's not going to be really easy to go in there militarily. But I was wondering, from the point of view of nonviolence and peacemaking, Mother Teresa is of Albanian Yugoslav background. What if she and Pope John Paul II and Elie Wiesel, a Jewish leader, and a Serbian Orthodox leader, and a Muslim leader, said, we're going to start a pilgrimage for peace right through the war-torn areas of Yugoslavia, and we're inviting thousands of peacemakers from all over the world to join us. And what if 10,000 people, completely nonviolently, went into Bosnia and stood between those warring forces and did nothing but pray for peace and show by their own unity that reconciliation and love is possible? I think that might be a nonviolent solution to this conflict in Bosnia.
But how feasible is that? I mean, you know, it's a great idea, but I could see the advisors to the Pope and the advisors to Mother Teresa saying, this is really not an area you want to go into. I mean, in this day of advisors, I mean, the effort is there, the concern is there, but then there are all these other outside influences. I could see the attention that it could bring. We talked about the media in the first part of our two programs here. the media attention would be tremendous and probably would rectify the situation there within 48 hours of all these world leaders walking through that area. But how feasible is it?
Well, I think it's very feasible because an Italian group called Beati I Costruttori di Pace took 500 ordinary people who were concerned about peace in Bosnia. They took a vessel across the Adriatic, they landed, they got 60 buses, and they went right through Yugoslavia, right into Sarajevo, and they worshiped there. They were greeted by people with tears in their eyes. They showed that it is possible to get through all those roadblocks, to go through Sniper's Alley and everything else, and to get in there. So the logistics are possible. And what I'm looking for is world religious leaders who are willing to do more than just verbal statements, who are willing to take some risks for peace, because I think we will not have peace until peacemakers are willing to take the same risks that soldiers take when they go into war.
Amen.
Waging peace is as difficult as waging war, if not more so. It requires tremendous patience and persistence and courage and faith.
And we're
Faith in
talking about-
ourselves and faith in God.
Right, the risk of the gospel. You know, when you say how feasible, I mean, that's not a question that Jesus ever asked, I don't think. How feasible is it, you know?
I would think one of the challenges to peace today is probably getting the message out from the pulpit into the congregations, because this document that we have here that's 10 years old, I wonder how many people remember the document. I wonder how many pastors took the time to preach about the document from the pulpit. And here it is 10 years after the fact, and society has changed, and we get people to say, I don't care, I don't want to hear it.
Well, the bishops are going to, as I understand it, in November, issue a statement at that time, just an assessment 10 years later. And I'm hopeful that they will still see the nuclear weapons as the dominant issue that they should address. There's a great danger that we've gotten comfortable with nuclear weapons. There is presently on the earth about a million Hiroshima bombs in the nuclear arsenals, and we are the possessors of about half that. And if the most optimistic figures are believed, in 10 years from now, we will have 3,500. Some people say that's wonderful. It's a 2/3 reduction. That's 50,000 Hiroshimas, though, that we will have. And the rest of the world, seeing our example, is likely to follow suit. So we'll have a thoroughly nuclearized world if we don't stop. Robert McNamara, who's very much involved in all of the nuclear planning
Former
in the
Defense
past,
Secretary.
Former Defense Secretary, a couple of weeks ago had an op-ed piece in the New York Times, and he said, nuclear disarmament is down to zero, is not only possible, it is not only necessary, but it is possible.
Sister.
Yes, when I consider your question and what the bishops might address today, I have to say this in all truth and out of great respect and compassion for my brother bishops. But I do believe that the bishops have lost some credibility today. I think the words of the bishops were more credible in 1983 than they are in 1993.
Why did they lose that credibility, sister?
Well, I think it's because that we need to do work on justice issues in-house within our own church. And I truly believe that we're at a point now, kind of an impasse, you might say, that if the bishops are really going to speak with credibility and authenticity to all these other issues that certainly demand their attention, they need to pay attention to justice issues within the church, including the inclusion of women. And therefore, I'm afraid, unless they look within themselves, examine their own hearts, and address these issues of justice, which are also related to peace in church, I'm afraid they will not have the credibility that they really deserve.
We're running short on time, and I would like to ask our other panelists for some concluding remarks. And Tom, I'll begin with you. Some concluding remarks. Where do we go from here? What do we do from here?
Well, the bishops called for a conversion of heart among individuals, and I think that's what we have to work on in our own lives. It's a never-ending process, and we just have to commit ourselves to it.
Nick.
I would encourage people to not only listen to programs like this, but to become involved in some peace organization like Pax Christi, for example, or like a Network, which is a lobby that was originally set up by nuns to press our government for legislation around peace and justice. If you're a part of an organization like Pax Christi, you're regularly getting newsletters and materials that make you aware of what the issues are, and you're given ideas on how to address those issues in a very practical way. And I think that's one of the most practical ways to work for peace, is to be a part of one of those organizations.
Sheila?
Okay, I do think that we have to take into consideration the basic needs of all the people in the world, and certainly those at home first. And by looking at the earth and what gives us life and what gives us our connection to God, that will help us then to meet our needs, to have peace within ourselves, and then reach out to other people in the community and be able to help them as well.
And Sister?
Amen.
Amen. In his encyclical, The Development of Peoples, Pope Paul VI summarized classical Catholic teaching in the words, quote, "Peace cannot be limited to a mere absence of war, the result of an ever precarious balance of forces. No, peace is something built up day after day in the pursuit of an order intended by God, which implies a more perfect form of justice among men and women." To those of you who have joined us for our discussion programs marking the 10th anniversary of the U.S. Catholic Bishop's letter, The Challenge of Peace, God's Promise, Our Response, I'd like to say thank you. And I'd also like to extend a very heart-warm and a very much appreciated thanks to our guests for participating in our two programs. Thank you very much. Until next week, I'm Paul Perillo.
In closing, I'd like to leave you with a final thought from the pastoral letter, The Challenge of Peace, God's Promise, Our Response. Faith does not insulate us from the challenge of life. Rather, it intensifies our desire to help solve them precisely in the light of the good news which has come to us in the person of Jesus, the Lord of history. It is our faith in Jesus that will sustain us as we face the new challenges of peace that lay before us. I'm Pat Shelton. Thank you for watching Catholic Magazine.
We at Catholic Magazine encourage you to become actively involved in peace and justice efforts and organizations. If you would like further information about joining Pax Christi or the Catholic Peace Fellowship, please call 215-665-0480. Information about the Center for the Celebration of Creation may be obtained by calling 215-242-9321. Videotapes of Catholic Magazine's two-part discussion on the 10th anniversary of the U.S. Bishop's pastoral letter, The Challenge of Peace, God's Promise, Our Response, are available. Please call us at 215-668-9842 for further details.
Set materials for Catholic Magazine provided by Tague Lumber Incorporated, serving the Delaware Valley for over 75 years. And by John Wanamaker, fine stores in the Delaware Valley. We welcome your comments, suggestions, and donations and encourage you to write us at Catholic Magazine, St. Charles Seminary, 1000 East Wynwood Road, Overbrook, PA, 19096, or call us during regular business hours at 668-9842.
Here's one time it doesn't matter who your neighbor is. Here's the other. Life's too short. Stop the hate.